Good evening, everybody. I want to thank everybody for coming. I think everybody knows, but we'll just make sure the restrooms are just cut through the kitchen, and go right through down the hallway here. Coffee and soda, coffee and water over there. Briefly, I'm with the Knights of Columbus. Those of you that don't know about the Knights, basically we started with a priest, Father McGivney, in New Haven, Connecticut. He saw a need for women being widows, and he basically formed an organization off of that to help widows. And we've grown to a worldwide organization. There's almost 2 million of us. We're rooted in family. We want to take care of family, whatever way that is, whether it's protecting life, whether it's helping marriages. So tonight, this is a big thing. One of our fellow brothers brought the topic up, and we thought it was a good thing to try to educate the community on. And we're a family organization. This hits home with us. So I want to thank everybody for coming tonight. Thanks.
So I thought where we would start this evening, you'll laugh that well, if you knew me, you would laugh that I'm going to use a football analogy because I'm really not into sports. But famous coach, football coach, Vince Lombardi, when he would train the new season, the new spring training, he would start with his very seasoned football folks, and he would hold up a football and say, "This is a football." So I thought where we would start this evening is with the basics. So if you already know the basics, just forgive us. But I thought we would start with, what is human trafficking? We hear these terms, human trafficking, sex trafficking, labor trafficking. What does any of it mean? So I thought we would start this evening using Peter DiMarzio here on my right with Homeland Security. First, he's going to tell you a little bit about who he is and who he works for and what his role is in our community. And then he's going to give us some of the basics that we should all know. And that's what we'll start with this evening. Peter?
Thank you. So I want to thank everybody for coming out tonight. It's a really good turnout, and I'm really glad to see men out here too, because it's not just a problem that affects women, it's a problem that also affects men as well. So a little bit about myself. I work for Homeland Security Investigations out of Boston. I'm the victim assistance specialist there. I'm assigned to the human trafficking unit. I cover the entire New England area, so I cover all 6 states, which encompasses about 63,000 square miles. So as you can imagine, I'm on the road quite a bit. We have 11 regional offices within New England. We actually have Portland, Bangor, and Fulton, Maine. So we have 3 offices in the state of Maine. We investigate all types of crimes. We investigate human trafficking, child exploitation, weapons trafficking, drug trafficking, antiquities fraud, you name it. We just about cover everything. Myself, I've been doing this line of work now for working with victims of crime for about 30 years. So I've seen a lot. In those 30 years, when you think you've seen it all, something else surprises the hell out of you and say, well, I never saw that before. So it doesn't surprise me anymore how a human can treat another human being when it comes to this crime. I hold a master's degree in counseling psychology. I'm also a PhD candidate in psychology. I presented at the United Nations on 2 occasions on the topic of human trafficking. And I also belong to the NGO on mental health at the United Nations as well. So my work goes a long way in working with victims. I work with victims of all ages, some as young as 5 years old, up to 53 years old. And that's what I do on a daily basis. I work I'm supposed to work like 5 days a week, so they say, but I'm probably working 7 days a week because this doesn't take a holiday, trafficking. So when my phone rings, I respond. So let me tell you a little bit about human trafficking. Is that what we're going to do right now? All right. So to give you a definition of what human trafficking is, human trafficking This is what we use. Human trafficking is the recruitment, transportation, harboring, obtaining of a person for illegal labor and services through the use of force, fraud, or coercion. And when you think of force, fraud, and coercion, well, force is exactly what it says. Force is through beatings, through torture, through burning them. Fraud is through false promises of a better way of life, false promises of a better education, a better relationship, a better way of getting ahead in the world. And then coercion is through threats. If you don't do what I say, I am going to hurt so-and-so. I'm going to hurt your family. I'm going to hurt your children. So that is what the definition of human trafficking is. Force, fraud, and coercion, those are the three elements that we look for to have a case of human trafficking, but out of those three elements, we only require one of those three elements to have a case. So who are the victims? I do a lot of these panel discussions, and when I hear people tell me who they think the victims are, yeah, they're right, but sometimes they can be furthest from the truth. Yeah, we have victims who are homeless. Yeah, we have victims who are runaways, children who run away from home and get caught up with the trafficker. Usually a runaway encounters a trafficker probably within the first 48 hours of being on the streets. And usually they're introduced by a friend who knows somebody, and they go along with their friend because they want to belong, they want to feel wanted, and this is what happens. It's a boyfriend type, girlfriend type situation, because what a trafficker does is prey on someone's vulnerability. That's what they do. I'll give you an example. One of the good places that they can recruit victims are at your local shopping malls. Because trafficking happens everywhere. It just doesn't happen in one place. It happens everywhere. It happens at your shopping malls. It happens in your school systems. It happens at the bus stations. So anywhere where people gather, that's where it can happen. So an example of a situation. So someone walks up to this girl at the mall and says, you know what, you have beautiful, beautiful eyes. And if that girl says to that guy, well, thank you very much, I know I do, he knows right then and there that that's not his victim. But if he uses that term on someone else and gets the response, no, I don't, why would you say that? He knows right then and there that's his victim. And he's going to start exploiting her and using her and gaining her trust. So they become almost like a boyfriend/girlfriend type situation. So nobody would look at them any differently as a boyfriend and girlfriend, because that's what's happening. He's fostering that relationship. He's building her trust. She'll even take him home to meet the parents. So he now knows where the parents live. He now knows who the parents are. And this is all information that he's going to use down the road to get her to do what he wants her to do. So this might go on for about 3-4 months. Okay, and this is what we call the grooming period. He's grooming his victim to get her to trust him, get her to do what he wants her to do. After a while, he'll start buying her very expensive clothing, very expensive jewelry, taking her out to fine restaurants, something that she's probably never experienced before, something that she felt was missing in her life. And again, she's feeling, wow, somebody finally cares about me. Somebody finally is really in love with me. And it's really the furthest from the truth. He's actually just going to be using her. Because when we look at trafficking victims, you probably heard the term, they're disposable. Because if he has no use for her, he'll go find somebody else just as quick. So there's a grooming period. After that, you might say to her, you know what, if we want that white picket fence, if we want that house, we need to start making some money. And that's where he'll get her to start looking at, well, why don't you do this? Why don't you go work at this massage parlor for a while, bring in some money, that way we can buy that house, we can buy what we need. And if you don't like it, you can stop. So with that, she usually does it, goes into the massage parlor, starts performing sex acts, gives him all the money in return. And at some point, she might say to him, I don't want to do this anymore. And that's when the force comes in. That's where the beatings might start. That's where the tide starts to turn on her. So there is no way out for her. There is no way out. And as a result, he'll start threatening her with, if you don't do this, I'm going to kill your parents. Because if you remember, he now knows where the parents live. He now knows who they are. I had one woman who actually invited her trafficker to Thanksgiving dinner with the parents at their house. So he knew everything about them, even where they worked, so he could go to their work and bother them there. So how does a person get out of this life? I've heard people say, well, this trafficker is not with them all the time, so why doesn't she just run? Why doesn't she just escape or go seek out law enforcement? And the reason they just don't run, even though they're alone, is because of those threats to family, those threats to children. Some of the women that I work with, as I said, some people just think they're homeless, runaways, drug addicts. But we have women that we worked with who, one was a Boston EMT, one was a cardiac nurse. So very educated individuals who fall prey to a trafficker because he was really good at picking up on the vulnerabilities of what they were lacking in their lives and filling that gap. So other forms of how they can get out of the life is they seek out law enforcement, or someone recognizes that something is not right with this situation. Giving another example of a case we worked, we had a woman from Zimbabwe who was a domestic servitude victim. She was a nanny for a couple that was here in the States going to school. She would watch the kids. She was only allowed to go to church on Sunday and only allowed to go to the local library with the kids. That was it. Other than that, she had to be home. So on Sunday, she would go to worship services. She would befriend some of the parishioners there. And little by little, she started telling her story to a couple of close friends that she made while she was there at church. And one of the women that she befriended said, you know what, this isn't right. This is really messed up. And she reached out to law enforcement. And that's when we became involved with the situation. And when we met with her, we actually met her at the library in Boston, because that's where she could go with the kids. She had 2 small kids that she was watching. She also had kids herself back in Zimbabwe that she hadn't seen in almost 2.5 years. So we met at the library, and what we do is we talk to her about how to get out of this life. Do you want to leave it? And we come from a victim-centered approach, which means we're not going to tell the individual what they should do or not do as far as victim services. Because if we do that, we know better than the trafficker telling them what they need to do. So we make it their plan. We listen to them as far as, what do you want? What would you like to see? What do you need as far as services to get back on that road to recovery? One of the things that we talked about, and this was over probably a week's time, where we met with her a couple of times at the library. And we talked about a safe house. We talked about finishing her GED. We talked about wanting to get a job as well and stay here and work. And One of the things her traffickers had done, I say traffickers because it was a couple, a man and a woman, they took her, this is one of the indicators of trafficking, they took her passport away from her. They took her ID away from her. So she had nothing to show who she was. And they took her passport as a way of controlling her, so she couldn't leave the country even if she wanted to. She couldn't even show an ID to anybody because they were holding it. So she was at their mercy. So she wanted to work. And where she was a foreign national, they had always said, you know, if you go to law enforcement, you're going to be deported. But we don't deport victims of human trafficking. We actually have 3 forms of immigration relief that we can offer victims of human trafficking. And one of the things we offered her was a continued presence visa. And up until about October 2016, continued presence visa was good for 1 year. In 2016, they extended that, and now it's good for 2 years. So they could stay here legally in this country for 2 years while they cooperate with law enforcement in the investigation. At any time they say, you know what, I don't want to do this anymore, I don't want to cooperate, they still keep that visa. It doesn't get yanked from them. They still keep the visa, they still stay in the safe house, they still receive services. 6 months prior to that continued presence visa expiring, we then looked at a T visa, and of course it stands for trafficking. And a T visa is good for 4 years. So in 4 years, they usually work towards becoming a citizen of the U.S. It also allows them to bring any family members they have living back in their home country into the United States as well. So with her, what she did is she started making preparations to bring her 2 kids here to the U.S. So she was in the safe house for, well, let me back up a bit. We actually picked her up. We made a plan to pick her up. She said, I want to go Sunday. I said to her, do you realize Sunday is Easter Sunday? And I knew she was really close to the kids. I said, are you sure you want to leave the kids on Easter Sunday? And she basically looked at me and said, I'm ready to go. And I said, all right. So Easter Sunday morning, we picked her up in a park in Boston. And again, remember Sunday, the couple thought she'd be at church. We picked her up and she had 1 trash bag full of her belongings. A trash bag that, you know, 5 years worth of stuff in 1 trash bag. I don't know about you, but 5 years I need a U-Haul truck, not a trash bag, all right? So we picked her up, took her to the safe house. We took her out to breakfast first. We took her by a Stop and Shop to buy her food that was native to her culture so she could cook at the safe house. She ended up staying at the safe house for about 2 years. And while she was there, she got the services she needed. She finished her GED. She went to vocational services, started working, trying to find a job. She found a job at one of the major hotels in Boston, where she was doing housekeeping. She then got promoted to concierge a year later. And then she left the safe house and she found her own apartment. And the safe house matched whatever she saved as far as giving her first and last month's rent on the apartment. She then brought her two sons over to live with her. And today, she's still working as a concierge at the hotel. Her sons are now living with her as well. And I see her every so often and she just tells me her life is great. And that she really thinks that we had reached out to her when we did. And she's now starting to educate others on what human trafficking is. But it doesn't always go like that, because sometimes the victims of human trafficking don't realize they're victims. Some of them don't even know what the term human trafficking is. So when you say to someone, you're a victim, they're going to say, no, I'm not. I'm not a victim. They don't know what it is. They just know that I'm the girlfriend of this guy. I'm not a victim. And usually it takes a while for that light bulb to come on, and they finally get it. They finally get it. And when we first encounter a victim, they might not want any services at all. They might just say, and trust me, I've had some of them tell me some things that I should be doing with myself that's physically impossible to do. And I get that. I get where they're coming from, because that tells me that they're not ready for services. They're not ready to move on to the next step. So what we do is we plant the seed. We let them know that, I let them know that I'm not going anywhere. When you want services, when you're ready for services, I'll be here. Call me when you're ready. So we have to do it on their time, when they're ready and when they want services. I've always said working with the victim of trafficking is like taking one step forward and 4 steps backwards. Because with the women that I work with mostly women who are U.S. citizens. That's who I see a lot of. Women who are U.S. citizens who are victims. And you think of drugs, a lot of these women weren't even on drugs until they met their trafficker, because it's another form of control. Some of these traffickers are paying the women in heroin just enough so they don't get sick from withdrawals, and they continue to work and bring the money in for their pimp, for their trafficker. So we have to do it on their own time. And there was one woman who I had in about 4 different safe houses. She lasted maybe 2 weeks in one, and a week in another, and one she went out the window, I think in 2 days. That tells me she's not ready. And she disappeared for almost 3 months. I didn't know where she was, what happened to her. And then I remembered she had a court date at the U.S. Attorney's Office. So I tried to call over there. I had just missed her. They said she was there. I had missed her. And around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, my phone rang at my office. And lo and behold, it was her. And she said to me, she goes, Peter, she goes, remember when you said, if I ever wanted services to give you a call? I said, yeah. She goes, I'm ready. I'm ready. She goes, I've had enough of this life. I want to get myself together. I said, all right, where are you? She goes, I'm outside your office. So I went downstairs, and there she was, standing there waiting. And we got her back into services. She got her labor union license so she could go into construction because she wanted to build houses. And today she's building homes. And she's doing well. And that was after 2 years in a safe house getting herself together. But it's difficult work because we have to meet them where they are in that particular time. With kids, it can be frustrating. Working with children under the age of 18, they go into group homes. And I've had plenty of kids tell me, you know what, if you're going to put me in a group home, don't bother, because I'm just going to run for that group home. They tell me, I'd rather take my chances on the street than go to a group home. So what we're looking is, what experience can we make different for them? How can we make the experience different that they'll want to stay and get the help? So there's a gentleman here in Maine, his name is Bob Atherton, who's with Thrive New England. And he's looking at minors and looking at a group home type network. But the group home is going to be totally different. It's going to be a husband and a wife, or whatever that couple may look like. And they'll be trained specifically on what human trafficking is. And they'll only take one minor per home and work with that child and get them into services and get them help. So we're hoping that it will be up and running by the end of this year, maybe beginning of next year. And it's something that we're hoping will spread throughout New England so we can help a lot of these kids. Because right now, we have to do something differently for these kids because what we have right now isn't working. A lot of them rather spend their time on the street and in services. So and kids are now being recruited into schools. The Blue Campaign, which has a lot of material that's free of charge. You can actually look online at the bluecampaign.gov, and all the material comes in 29 different languages. And up until about 2 years ago, you never saw anything any videos or any public service messages for kids. Now you can find 10 or 12 of them just pertaining to children and how kids are being recruited in schools, and what's happening within the school systems and who's recruiting them. It's other students recruiting these kids. I did a presentation at a couple of schools on Cape Cod, and they were telling me exactly where we should be going. No, you should be going to the Cape Cod Mall. You hit these kiosk vendors over here. They're always recruiting young women to try and get into sex trafficking. Well, you should go to this restaurant in P-Town. It's a front for the Russian mob, and they're flying women over to the islands for sex parties. So the students are very well aware of what's happening and where it's happening. So we need to do a better job working with the students and getting them on board, and in return, getting the services that they're going to benefit from, so they're not constantly running and in the streets.
How much money is being made?
So, how much money is being made, she said. Any guess? Any guess how much of a profit this business is making?
Billion.
How much?
Billion.
Billion? It's a $150 billion industry. 150 billion. 99 billion roughly comes from sex trafficking. So at one point it was more than Google, Starbucks, and Nike combined. So it is profitable. And what we're seeing is more gangs getting into human trafficking. Gangs notoriously were selling drugs. Well, you sell drugs, it's gone. They use it and it's gone. But they figured out you can sell a woman over and over and over again, 15, 20 times a day. And they're bringing in good money. And most of these traffickers are running anywhere between 10 and 12 women. So do the math, and it's some pretty serious money.
So under the umbrella of human trafficking falls sex trafficking, labor trafficking, and organ trafficking, where they actually steal people's organs to the highest bidder. Before the internet, child molesters were everywhere. Wherever there's human beings, there are people who are interested in same sex, opposite sex, both sexes, and children. They were everywhere. But now with the internet, it's kind of like putting fuel on the fire. It has just blown up. Now predators' reach is just infinite, all over the globe. Now that we sort of have an understanding about what is human trafficking, what are the three kinds of human trafficking, and what Homeland Security's role, what the victim's assistant agent role is, let's go to Jonathan now, our district attorney for Cumberland County, and talk about what's happening right here in Maine. So Jonathan, I'll send it over to you.
A couple years ago, or actually it's probably about 2013, I was the drug prosecutor down in York County. Now, I grew up in Cumberland County, and I moved down to Massachusetts to work down there as a prosecutor, and I moved back in 2012. And a colleague of mine who was the drug prosecutor here in Cumberland County told me and the other drug prosecutors across the, just want to break the ice there. Drug prosecutors about this story, this true story that happened that law enforcement, Portland PD, stumbled upon on High Street in Portland. And it was basically that they came upon they were called for a service for a fight that was occurring at an apartment. This is during the day. And there was an individual who was running from the police, a male, who the police stopped, and they searched him for weapons, and they found a very large quantity of drugs. So they said, okay, this must just be a drug situation, and they found two women inside, one 18 years old, I think the other one was 23 years old. The 18-year-old was originally from Aroostook County. She was severely beaten, and they didn't really get her story initially. And then the other person they found had a cut to her leg, and so they said, okay, this must be some sort of fight that had happened. Well, the drug dealer who was outside said, oh, well, you got the wrong person. That woman in there with the cut on her leg, that's one of the biggest drug dealers in Portland. And then they started talking to the girl who was 18, who was from up north, about her story. And it turned out that what she told them really kind of frightened me to this day, that I remember this story very clearly, is that she had been stuck working and being trafficked by that drug dealer for about 4 or 5 months. And it surprised law enforcement. And this is only about 5 or 6 years ago now. To the point that they started looking into her story, which was basically that, yes, I had come down to Portland for a better life. I met this other woman at Preble Street. I was looking for some friends. I was looking for something to do. She befriended me. She said, hey, why don't you come party with me? And she partied with her. She started doing heroin. She started doing crack cocaine. And sort of at the end of that weekend, when then she was out partying with this woman, the woman turns to her and says, hey, well, guess what? You owe me $3,000 for all those drugs that I gave you. And she said, well, you know me. The street name was Shorty. She said, Shorty, you know me. I don't have anything. You picked me up down at the resource center. She says, oh, that's all right. You can work it off. And she said, what do you mean work it off? Well, you can trick. And that's street language for prostitute. And she says, well, I don't want to do that. Well, that's when the beating started. And this girl was stuck in the life for about 4 or 5 months, basically being trafficked by Shorty. She would have men come in who would use her, pay Shorty. Shorty would keep her doped up on heroin and crack cocaine. And she was stuck. And if she tried to leave, she got beat. And that's when the police found her. But the police started looking into her story and really kind of, okay, well, this is just, might be a story. And one aspect of it that is really chilling is that about 3 months earlier, she told the police about how one night when she didn't want to do what she was being told she had to do, Shorty and another a male beat her up, left her naked on Cumberland Ave at about 2 a.m. in February. And when the police looked into it, they actually saw that Portland PD had driven by and saw a naked woman, helped her, gave her some blankets, brought her down to the resource center. She didn't tell them what had happened to her, but they didn't know. But that verified, that corroborated what she had already told the police. And what's really kind of frightening about this story too, is that Shorty had been arrested maybe a year earlier at Portland Police down in York County, where I was working at the time, for a fight that was occurring at one of those hotels along Route 1 in either Saco or Old Orchard Beach that I'm sure all of us have driven by. And when the police arrived, there were 2 males, Shorty and another female who had been beaten very severely. Police didn't recognize it. They didn't know what was happening. That victim left the state. The prosecutors weren't able to find her, and that case was dismissed. It was just charged as an assault. People didn't know. So what happened with Shorty and her victim was that it started opening the eyes to law enforcement in our community about sex trafficking, and that this isn't an international problem. This isn't a problem that only happens in New York and Boston and Washington, D.C. and Atlanta. This is happening in our community, and it's happening right now. And with the opioid epidemic, what Peter was talking about with regards to that mechanism of control, now traffickers have such a crucial and controlling weapon when it comes to the opioid epidemic that it doesn't always just take physical violence or threats to families. Now what can happen is that they can simply get them addicted to opioids, and they're the ones who are controlling these, and they're the ones who are giving this to these individuals, these victims. So what we've done in the law enforcement community and in the DA's office is my predecessor started the first human trafficking unit in the state of Maine, that we look at these cases and we target them threefold. First is we try to obviously look for victims. We try to find women who are working in the life and women who every one of us would think are they're just prostitutes. Well, we've changed the mindset, and we're trying to change it more, is that we don't look at people who are working in prostitution as criminals. We look at them as victims. I've talked to enough victims of sex trafficking and prostitution that I now know that something happened in that person's life that led them to be where they are, and it wasn't a good thing. And that's the mindset that we have to change as a community as a whole, is to understand that no woman and no man to a certain extent, but no woman would go out and say, this is what I want to do for a living. This is what I want to be. This is how I want to have spend my time. This is how I want to be in my life. And what we now know is that most of the women who are out there working in prostitution are doing it because it's the only way they know how to survive. And we really need to sort of change that mindset. And so what we have, when we encounter victims of sex trafficking at the Cumberland County DA's office, what we try to do is get services to that person. Let them know that there are resources out there that can help, that law enforcement can help. And thankfully, as a community, we have some great resources right here in this room. We have Catherine with Stop Trafficking Us. We have Nancy and Nicole, who are here from Just Love with the East Point Church, and Mary. Sorry, and then there's some other great services out there. There's Survivor Speaks, and there's Hope Rising, and there's Purple Street Anti-Trafficking Services. These are the people who are out there looking to help victims on that level, that they're trying to get them and trying to teach them that there are other ways to survive, that there are people out there that want to help them. The other thing that we do with at the DA's office with regards to taking on this is that we try to go after the market, the demand side of this, which is the men and women, but mostly the men who buy sex. Mm-hmm. With prostitution now, it doesn't take what the old days were just driving down the street and looking for a woman on the street who was trying to solicit something. Now with the internet, it takes on a whole nother sort of anonymity for people who want to buy prostitution. And what we try to do is target those individuals who buy sex to make them understand that it's not acceptable to do that. And we need to change the mindset in our community so people understand that it is wrong to do that, because the person on the other side is a victim. As a prosecutor, I've had defense attorneys tell me all the time, it's a victimless crime, it's a victimless crime. Well, no, it's not. Not when you're out there actually talking to the victims, not when you're out there understanding what they're going through. It's not a victimless crime. So if we could take down the demand, then the market disappears. So what we try to do is make sure that the people who get caught for prostitution get educated on that. And hopefully educated sort of some tough love on that, but make sure that they don't do it again. And if they do it again, then there's going to be some severe consequences for it. And then the other thing, the sort of the third prong that we go after is the traffickers, the pimps, the people that prey on the victims out there only to use them as basically a human ATM machine. And it's sick because, as Peter told you, the grooming aspect, a lot of victims don't even understand that they are being trafficked. I spoke with a victim who told me, I'm not very good with money, that's why he holds on to all the money. That's how much he just basically brainwashed this person. And it's not just the grooming when it comes to talking to sort of the boyfriend aspect, when they come in as boyfriends. We know of pimps that go to rehabs, to treatments, to AA meetings, to intensive outpatient programs, and they wait for people to come out for cigarette breaks. And they look at the crowd and they say, okay, that's the one. And they go up and they start befriending that person, and next thing you know, he's got her. And it's one of those things that when you hear those stories, it sticks with you to the point that we need to know that we have to act more as a community to stop this. And with the pimps, we target the pimps and we know who they are. We get intel, we get information from law enforcement, because we know that a lot of times people don't get arrested for sex trafficking. As Peter just said, the sex trafficking and the drug trafficking are so intertwined that 9 times out of 10, I'm going to get somebody who I know is a pimp, who I've had victims tell me that person has exploited me, but they'll come in as a drug dealer. So if we know that they're a drug dealer, we know that if we can get them behind bars, even for a weekend, that's going to give a chance for the people who are under that person's control to get free, to get to those services. Unfortunately, when you have victims of sex trafficking, a lot of them come from broken homes. A lot of them have mental health issues. A lot of them have suffered physical abuse or mental abuse. A lot of them have substance abuse disorders. And more importantly, a lot of people don't have anywhere to go. So if law enforcement encounters somebody at 2 a.m. and they say, "Do you want services?" and we say, "Sure, yes, please help me," we might be able to get them a bed for a night. But what happens after that? Or if there's some reason that they say, "No, take me to jail," and we actually think that jail, unfortunately, might be the only safe place for them, guess who's going to bail them out? Him. Him shows up to bail them out. And if that person's willing to go, there's really nothing the law enforcement can do to stop. We can try. And we do. But it's very difficult to try to take that step. So we try to go after those pimps as hard as we can to make sure that they understand and they know that this is not acceptable, that this is criminal, and we want to make sure that they're behind bars. But the biggest aspect to me, as now the district attorney, is to get out here, and that's why it's so great to see so many faces here tonight, because this is the first step that we have to take as a community so people understand the problems that we have. Because if we don't recognize the problems, we're not going to have a solution to those. And so it's very important that you get out there, you talk to your communities, you talk to people in your neighborhood, you talk to your family, you talk to your friends, you make them recognize that this is a problem that we are all facing. And because if we don't, then you're not going to look at the people the right way. Law enforcement's taken a huge step in the last few years of recognizing victims and not thinking them as criminals. And I'll just stop and I'll tell a quick story. This is another case, and this is one of those rare happy endings that we see on these types of cases. There was a woman who was working as a prostitute, and a police officer who had been educated by what had happened went to talk to them and didn't go up and say, "Hey, you guys can't do this." He went to say, "Hey, how's everyone doing tonight? Is everybody okay? Is everybody safe?" And 3 of them said, "Yeah, we're okay, we're okay." Didn't want to really talk to him because a lot of times victims don't trust law enforcement. But the 4th said, "Well, I'm okay, except I was raped at gunpoint 4 nights ago." And so Portland Police did a fantastic investigation and found that what her story was absolutely true. That she had been picked up, she was working as a prostitute, so she was unfortunately willing to perform sex acts for money, and a man picked her up, flashed a badge, said, "I'm a police officer, get in the car." He showed a gun, he forced her to perform oral sex on him, and he left. It would have cost him $60. But he had that control mechanism. He wanted to show a gun. And through an investigation by the police, they found out who this person was. He was living with his wife down in Lyman, Maine. That he was the son of a retired police chief. That's how he got the badge. And right now he's in Warren Prison because the police did an investigation and the victim had the courage to tell the police officers what happened. And the police had the sort of smarts now, the enlightenment, to ask a person to look at a person as a human being, not as a criminal. And right now, that woman is out of the life. She's married, she's got a child, and she's living up in central Maine. And that's a happy ending. If the police officer hadn't taken that step, not only would she have not gotten out of the life, but who knows what that criminal would have done the next time with that gun. He might have taken that life if somebody had defied what he had asked for. So that's the important steps that we are taking as law enforcement, and hopefully we can all take as a community. Because if we don't, this problem's just going to keep getting worse.
Thank you so much for that. So some of you were wanting to know what our resources are. On your table, we put together this resource guide. Some of the resources that Jonathan was talking about are on there. You wanted to know what some of the signs were, and I believe both of our speakers so far have covered what some of those signs are. When you see a young person with expensive bags, new clothes, a new cell phone, maybe their personality has changed. They're always looking at their phone. They're more nervous than they normally are. They're sneaking out of the house. They're skipping school. Something isn't quite right. That's one way. Another way that Peter had talked about was someone doesn't have ID with them. Somebody else is speaking for them. You're asking him or her a question and somebody else is answering for them. But the greatest sign there is in human trafficking or sex trafficking or child abuse for that matter is your own intuition. When your gut says, you know, I'm not seeing any of the typical signs, I'm not seeing typical red flags, but something in my gut is saying something isn't right here. Let me tell you that 99.9% of the time, you're going to be absolutely right. So rather than be nervous about causing trouble and calling somebody, just call. If you see something, you feel something, say something. For parents, the educational process starts young. It should start young. Simple things that we can do to educate our children. For instance, how many of us have gone to somebody's house and our toddler or somebody else's toddler didn't want to be held? And they're like, no, I don't want to hold that person, And I felt embarrassed. So I would hand my child over to Uncle Fred or Aunt Mary because I know that they're safe. Really? I've lost an opportunity to teach that child that it's okay to not have a grown-up touch them. As children, I was taught you have to obey grown-ups. But now it's a new world we're living in, and educating our children has to come from a new place. Being able to shake somebody's hand versus hugging them. Saying no, having the difficult conversations way more than the conversations that we may or may not have had with our parents. That's where Jennifer Weissner comes in. She does educational classes for couples, but also for families. How to talk to your child, calling a vagina and a penis. But I will, on that note, turn it over to Jennifer Weissner.
It's always a great way to be introduced. So now with me coming into the picture here now, it's kind of a departure from that part, and Catherine just introduced that. It's some very heavy material that you all received tonight, and I'm here kind of the boots on the ground on what do we need to do preventatively and proactively, and that's my job. I'm a licensed clinical social worker for many years. So I have a private practice where I see couples and just individual adults regarding matters of relationship, intimacy, sexuality. And in addition to that, I also created a program called Girls on Fire, co-created that with another colleague. And that's for 14 to 18-year-old female identified persons. It's free. We do it once a year. And it's for young women because we don't do a good job at educating them about their bodies and giving them good sex education. We don't give our kids good sex education to begin with, but particularly young women. And so we provide that for them once a year. It's actually going to be coming up on April 28th. And anyone can come to that who's between the ages of 14 and 18. And in addition to that why I'm here tonight is I created Raising Sexually Healthy Children workshops. I thought to myself as a practitioner, there's got to be more than I can do than to support people who have had poor experiences in their sexual lives and see them suffer through that. And so I literally one morning woke up and was like, wait a minute, if I can target parents of small children and start teaching them how important it is that they teach them about their bodies, consent, safety, and well-being within their body, that wait a minute, and as I told my kids, I can change the world. And so that is my mission, and my little hashtag that Catherine loves is, I'm here to reduce the shame in Maine, because shame is something that is not something you're born with, it's taught. And so we do such just a poor job in our culture around educating our children because we have so much taboo and garbage that we carry around regarding our sexuality. We avoid it. And so let me just ask you, how many of you in this room, I ask this at every one of my workshops, so why not here? How many of you feel that you received information when you were an adolescent about your body, about sexuality, about sex, that you felt good about it and you knew what to do and you knew how to handle yourself? I got one way in the back.
That's the response she gets every time.
Every time. Once in a blue moon, if I'm speaking to medical students, or I go also up to Bates and I do lecture. Once in a while, I'll get one who said, you know, my mom was a feminist, or my mom was a doctor, or my dad was a nurse, or whatever. But it's really an important question, because I think then we feel like, oh, we're not doing it enough, we're not doing enough, or we're not doing it right. Well, no one ever taught you. If no one ever taught us, how do we then in turn expect to teach our children? And so my Raising Sexually Healthy Children workshops are for parents, I say parents, educators, and providers, and those who influence children. So maybe it's coaches, maybe it's clergy, maybe it's nuns, it's anyone who has influence with children, that to help them understand what is natural and normal healthy sexuality developmentally. And so I created these workshops that are fun, that are accessible, and this way parents can feel more confident in having these conversations that are critical to the development over time. Because what we know is if we've had poor experiences when we're young, sadly, I say shame is like pine pitch. It's sticky and it's really hard to move on from. And so I'm here tonight to sort of, be that person who's a resource around what are we doing here proactively and preventatively from a young age, so we never have children who end up in this situation. There was a study done by Columbia University in November of this past year that found that, and I'm just going to read this part so I get it exactly right. Comprehensive sex education that specifically included training in sexual communication skills, especially in terms of how to turn down unwanted sex, was linked to a lower risk of victimization. Specifically, those who received this type of sex education were about half as likely to report having been sexually assaulted in college. And these respondents also mentioned that the education that they did receive when they were younger was, quote, awkward and, quote, poorly delivered. And so even though we're a comprehensive sex education state, which means that we provide both abstinence education as well as contraception education, there's no standardization across the state. So any school could teach whatever they want or omit whatever they want. And so when they do studies around information from kids and young adults about what they are receiving, they all say they're not talking about information that's helpful to us. And we can see that. We can see that in the problems that we're having, that, kids are going into the world as adults without knowing the information to how to protect themselves, how to make good choices around that, because no one is teaching them.
Where are our boys learning?
Sadly, we know that the biggest, and I use this term extremely lightly, the biggest sex education tool that our kids are using is pornography. And it's not sex education. And so what I always say to parents is, if you want them to learn it there, then don't talk to them. But we need to be, I say that teaching a child about their body is a human right. And if we are not doing that, we're violating their rights. And that's how strongly I feel about it. So at this point, over 600 adults have gone through my workshop so far. And I do them privately in my home office for small groups of 10. And then I also do them more recently this spring. It's been just really busy, which has been wonderful that there's an acceptance and an openness around the naturalness around healthy sexuality. But some churches are contacting me where I'm going to be doing workshops. And then also private schools, and I do parent coffees where I speak to parents at schools at parent coffees in the evenings. But we need to be doing this so we don't have these social problems that we are having. If a child, the way that I structure my workshops and the way that I believe sexuality is sort of best experienced is we teach it in reverse, sadly. We teach that fear message instead of, if we teach children about how wonderful and beautiful their bodies are, they will learn that sense of health and well-being within. So when something feels coercive or manipulative or hurtful, they will know that that is not good. Versus we teach it in reverse. We teach fear about sexuality. And then, as one young lady that said to me that will always stay with me, she's like, I never knew how to say yes in my life because I was always just taught no. And so we need to balance those messages out. One of my favorite quotes is Dr. Ruth Westheimer, who said, teach them everything and ask them to wait. And I think that's an excellent way of looking at it. Giving information is power, and then teach them your values around that. All the research points to that kids want to know what we have to say. They want to know your values. And even when they have ear pods stuck in their ears, they still want to know. So that's my role tonight. On the back table back there, I put a bunch of resources. I put a white paper on all different kids' books that parents and grandparents can read with their kids, books that they can read independently that are geared towards their age group. And then I also put information about my private consultations too, because I'm kind of that emergency person when people go, I get that phone call that say, my 8-year-old has porn on their tablet. How did this happen? And what do I do? And those are the kind of calls that I get. So I do consultations around that of calming them down and helping them not instill further shame. And then also my workshop information, as well as a few other things about, I didn't include my Girls on Fire tonight, but my cards are back there for anyone that's heard anything that's of interest. I am always happy to email or have a phone conversation about the resources that I provide across the state.
Speaking of technology, that was excellent. Thank you so much. Tell them the story about the technology in kids, the Canada guy.
As Catherine was saying earlier about technology and the internet and how it's exploded, and you can basically get anything and anybody you want online. I mean, we've seen online auctions of women who are being sold across the globe. But one in particular, and again, traffickers can be anybody. And unfortunately, we've seen parents who have trafficked their kids. We've seen uncles, you name it. But this one in particular, every time, I know Catherine has told it before, but we actually got a call from one of our offices in North Carolina, and they were working a case, and they identified, I think it was 2 or 3 young men, when I say young, in their teens, from the New England area. And they had listed them as victims of this situation, what was happening. And they were investigating this case where kids were on the internet, they were in chat rooms, they were on Facebook, and these kids, these 3 young men were actually approached, and another 15-year-old told them, hey, I can see your IP address. And your IP address actually shows your location, where you're located. And he then told them, I can send you a program you can download onto your computer that will hide your IP address so nobody can see where you're at. So he said, let me know when you download it, and I'll tell you what to do next. So he sends them the program, they download it, and the next thing he tells them, I just gave you a virus. If you don't do what I tell you to do, I'm going to activate the virus and destroy your computer. And a lot of teenagers, where did they get their computers from? From their parents, right? So in order not to get the parents upset or mad, they do what this person tells them to do. He then tells them to go over to Skype, and he gets them to perform sexual acts through Skype. This guy can see them, but they can't see him. If there's brothers and sisters in the house, they'll get the young man to recruit the brothers or the sisters into doing sex acts as well. So through about 1.5 years of investigating this situation, they actually found this individual, and he was actually doing all this from Ottawa, Canada. And at last count, he had a little over 350 victims that he was doing this to. And as it turned out, he was also in residency to be a pediatrician. So it just shows you who can be a trafficker, who can exploit children. So when I tell parents, if you have computers in the house, put it in a central location so you can see what your kids are doing and who they're talking to. I know when my kids were little, and I'm going to give myself away here, AOL. I don't know if anybody remembers AOL anymore. But I walked up, we had one of our rooms that we turned into an office, and I was just in the office, and I looked at my daughter's, friend list, and she had 3,500 friends. And I'm like, how do you know that, How do you know that many people? So for the next 3.5 hours, we actually sat there and went through every single person on that list. How do you know this person? Well, I know this person through so-and-so and through so-and-so. Have you ever met them? No. They live in Chicago. Delete. Well, by the time we finished, we had about 43 people that she actually knew and had met. So again, you got to be aware that anybody out there on the internet today can be a predator. There's an image out there of this kid sitting, in front of their computer and this hand reaching out, grabbing them, because that's what's happening out there. Parents, family members, they need to be aware of what their kids are doing on their computer and who they're talking to. Because sometimes it could turn out tragic in this situation. And we've seen a lot more of these type of situations that are happening as well.
Talk a little bit more about that with Peter. That's one of the most important things about doing things like this and meeting with people like you, is to just make sure you're educated and you educate your kids. I grew up in Cumberland County, and this was before cell phones, before the internet, but my parents.
How old are you?
I'm 39. Not that old. I don't know. But what's funny about it is that I remember being educated about, all right, if somebody calls and your parents aren't home and they ask if your parents are home, never tell them that you're alone. That was a landline. Kids don't have landlines these days, so the education changes, but protecting your children doesn't. And what kids need to understand is that no matter what somebody says that they might do to your computer, your family, or somebody, that it's okay, come talk to us about it. Because there are people who are going to can exploit your children worse than any punishment that you would ever dole out. And the kids can't be afraid to tell you about what's happening. The internet is an open door, it's an open window into your house that anybody can come through. And you have to recognize that that's what it is. Because if you think you're safe and secure because you lock your doors and you put on your alarm, you're not, as long as you have that IP address. Unfortunately, with what Peter was saying, is that we've been seeing some situations. Anybody ever heard of Fortnite, the video game? Well, Fortnite is one of those interactive games where a 15-year-old might think he's playing another 15-year-old in Oklahoma. Well, guess what? That 15-year-old in Oklahoma isn't 15. Exactly, 50, 35, could be a sex offender. Wow. And what we've seen is that these kids get really into these games. And they get a message from this other person that says, hey, if you want the code to get as many lives as you want, I've actually never played Fortnite, so I don't know how it works. But however, if you want this code to get an advantage, let me know. So the kid says, sure, yeah, definitely. Next thing you know, they're in a situation like Peter just described. And they're afraid to go to their parents to say, hey, I screwed up, I'm sorry. And they just go along with whatever this person tells them to do. So that's the education that that parents need to have, so that they can be aware of the dangers that are out there to our children.
Can I jump in there, Catherine? There's a resource that I think it's fantastic, that I give to parents all the time, and in the same vein around, historically, I think most of us were taught stranger danger. Well, that was really not good. That made a lot of kids anxious, and if you think about it, for any small child, Everyone is a stranger, and we don't want to teach them to be afraid of everyone. So this organization, kidpower.org, came into existence. And what they do is teach that there's a thing called stranger safety. And if we follow these guidelines that they talk about on the website, and everything is free there, which is wonderful. If we follow these guidelines, we can, be with strangers and be safe. And so it teaches it in a very different light of how to be safe with strangers, which are most people to young children, without that big fear. Because otherwise we're just, drilling into them to be fearful of everything. So what I like about this organization too is they help you as parents or people who work with kids of how to empower the child through real world examples. I've used it with people that have come in for private consultations around maybe an incident that has happened on the bus with another child, either asking, another small child asking a child to pull up their dress or pull down their pants or whatever, and them feeling very scared and not knowing what to do. How do you empower your child to say no and mean it, and even around body language and how to handle themselves? And so it's a great resource that I know I didn't include this evening and I should have shared with you, but really a great resource to teach. And there's that bridge between the conversations that John is talking about, these conversations we need to have about safety are the same kind of conversations we need to be having about sexuality and bodies. They all go together. And if we can talk about one, we can talk about the other.
So when we look at the umbrella of human trafficking, and we know there's sex trafficking and labor trafficking, and we know that that's driven by greed, that is a money. You guys remember when all the houses were foreclosing and all the houses were anything copper was being ripped out? I mean, the vultures were just descending. Well, the vultures are descending on our young people for money, just like they were descending on copper. And they have all these different ways to get to our kids. And one of the ways that makes our children most vulnerable is if they have previous abuse. That's why we're sort of talking about the precursor being child sexual abuse, and why preventative measures like what Jennifer's talking about is so imperative. So we're sort of getting close to the end. I wanted to tell you just a little bit of my story, just so we can break some myths about who are these kids who are being abused. 1 in 5 children are being sexually abused in the state of Maine. It's 1 in 4 girls, 1 in 6 boys, so we just say 1 in 5 across the board. We don't want you to think that every single human being that's walking around is a child sex predator or a pimp trying to scoop up our kids. Our young people, it's actually a small percentage, but the damage that small percentage does is enormous. The average assault that a predator does in his or her lifetime is 150 abuses during their career. That's huge. We know that 70% of the pornography made in the world is made in the United States, and that 90% of that is made in the child's own home. Crazy numbers. So, and we have some misconceptions, and one of the things that, not all internet-based things have predators coming in, but some of them do. What do predators need? Predators need an inclination to abuse, they need a vulnerable child, and they need access to that child. Well, there's nothing we can do about what someone is sexually attracted to, that inclination to abuse. There is some stuff that we can do for the vulnerability of our children, but what child isn't vulnerable, right? But where we really have a stronghold, where our power lies, is access to our children. That is where we really have some power to be able to be that block. Some of the ways that we can block it, is what folks were talking about here, is parental controls. Being able to take anything that has access. I had one police officer that said, If you let your child go into their bedroom with anything that has internet access, you might as well just take that child, bring him to the worst part of town at midnight and drop him off at the park. Because that is how serious it is to let your child have access without grown-ups overseeing and seeing who they're talking to. For me, I was the oldest. I was the oldest of 3 children. My mom and dad were happily married. There was no alcohol abuse, no raging, no food insecurity. My dad was an electrician. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. And we had a good life. We had a summer camp. We rented cottages to the public in southern Maine in the summertime. And my dad didn't like the cold, so we went to Florida in the wintertime where he was an electrician. And I had a happy family. But my brother was born with severe asthma, and I'm a little bit older than Jonathan. And back then, they didn't have the medicine that they have now, and it was pretty serious. The doctor would come and say, hey, you need to say goodbye to your son. He's not going to make it. It was that kind of serious asthma that he had. So my parents' attention was turned. And the vice principal of my elementary school when I was in first grade knew my family situation, knew I was a vulnerable child, and would come and take me out of class because I was his special girl. Back, now you guys grown because you know what that means, but back then it was like, isn't that nice of him? He cares about her, he's taking her out of class. We also know in the whys, the biological whys, actually Harvard's doing research on that. When someone has been sexually abused once, it just sort of, it's like blood in the water and the sharks come from all over the place. It's like there's a neon sign over your head and every abuser within 60, have you ever had a dog in heat? And like, where did these dogs come from? When you've been sexually abused, it's like predators come out of everywhere. And it was the babysitter, and it was the uncle, and it was my aunt, and it was, the people that should have been protecting me. When we think about predators, like what Jennifer was talking about, stranger danger, the abusers that get to our children are the people that our children know and trust. Don't think that a title means that that person is safe. Like I said, I don't want you to think that everybody is a predator. I just don't want you to think that somebody's not a predator because they're a family member, because they're a doctor, because they're a priest, because they're a Boy Scout leader, because they're your friend, because they're, they've known you as somebody in your family your whole life. We have to block that access. So for me, it was the various people, and I was a bedwetter, and the doctor said, oh, she's just, a young girl, and there's trouble with your, medical trouble with your son. She's fine. All the signs now that would be like something is going on with this child. Nightmares, bedwetting, not eating, all the indicators that were there, but nobody just sort of fell through the crack, and that happens sometimes. So now I'm going to school, and I behave differently. Did I behave differently because I was a weirdo kid before abuse? Possibly. Or I was just, changed because of the abuse, and I behaved differently. And just like my chickens, my flock of chickens, if one chicken is something's wrong with it, all the other chickens attack it. And so at school, all the kids were attacking me. I was being bullied every day, horribly. But the boys were nice to me when nobody was looking, and the girls were awful to me. And so I didn't have the education, and my parents didn't have the education that Jennifer's talking about. And so when the boys were nice to me, some kind of attention was better than nothing. And so what if they touch me? Everybody else is touching me anyway. And if touching me is the price I need to pay for someone to talk to me, for someone to hold me, for me to feel safe, then okay. So now I'm promiscuous in school, and I'm starting to run away. So from 12 years old to 17 years old, I started running away more and more and more. The older I got, the longer I would stay away from home. First, I would run away to what I thought were friends. Acquaintances at school would say, well, you can stay at my house. Well, when you stay at somebody's house and the grown-ups there don't call your parents or don't let the authorities know, odds are, and they were, that they're predators too. Can't tell you how many of my friends' older brothers or fathers would put their hand over my mouth and drag me into the other room and abuse me. So I was like out of the frying pan and into the fire. So I would stay at other places. I would stay in abandoned forts in the woods. I would stay in empty apartment buildings. I would stay on the outskirts. And predators know to look at the outskirts like hyenas when you see Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom. I'm giving my age away again. But when you would see that, where the hyenas go? They would go on the edges of the herd and look for those vulnerable people. So now as a runaway, I'm being raped, I'm being beaten, I'm being found out in these different places that I would hide, and then getting incarcerated for unlikely things. Like I was picked up for stealing a towel out of Dillard's because I wanted to take a bath in one of the places that I was hiding in. I was arrested for being a runaway at the church turkey shoot in Cape Girardeau, Missouri. Funny. So by the time I was 15, I was in the worst part of, one of the worst parts in Maine. I was in a really bad area in Biddeford, staying in someone's basement apartment. I had stopped menstruating because I was so malnutritioned, just stopped. I was in an awful situation, and in this, the street, Pike Street, in this basement apartment, a couple floors up, were a couple of teenagers. Well, I would imagine they're teenagers, a couple of girls, older girls, and they had their own apartment. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is so cool, they have their own apartment. And they invited me in, and they had, like a nice little apartment happening. And they gave me macaroni and cheese with tuna fish and peas. And if you've ever been starving and you eat something, you can actually feel it hit your bloodstream. That was like amazing. And they said, I said, what sort of job do you do? And they said, well, we have sex. We've got a couple boyfriends, and never called them pimps. And our boyfriends make sure we get paid. And they hold our money for us, and they keep us safe. And we just do what we're doing anyway. We like sex, and we're doing this, and we get paid for it. And you can have your own apartment too if you just, you can use our boyfriends. We'll talk to them for you. And I said, okay. I mean, I'm 85 whatever pounds at the time. I'm starving. Who cares if one more person has sex with me? By that time, by 15, I had been choked to unconsciousness at that point. I'm going fast because we don't have much time. I'm skipping over a bunch of stuff. I had been beaten, just every imaginable thing. So when they offered, hey, you can make some money and have your own place and buy food, I was like, okay, whatever, okay. And they invited their two friends over, and their street name was Salt and Pepper. It was a black guy and a white guy. And the black guy, what's that Allstate commercial? That charming black guy, like this guy was beautiful and charming and handsome and very suave. And the white guy had a pencil-thin mustache, really thick glasses, and one eye went over to the right. You get to pick who your boyfriend is going to be. And when I look back over my 55, soon to be 55 years, I see God's intervention over and over and over again, things that happened that I could have gone left and I've gone right. And this was one of them. You would have thought I would have picked the Allstate guy, but I picked the other guy, and the good thing I did, because the man of color, he was a part of an organization that had a bunch of girls up and down the East Coast. They had pornography places in Lowell, Massachusetts. They had a web. When you're looking at a map and you see all these like highways, there are different spots. It's a whole underground world of prostitution, sex trafficking, and child pornography that is just like a web spread all over the United States, even back then. And so by the grace of God, I picked the other guy who was like a pimp wannabe. He only had a few girls and was kinder to me than the other guy. Pepper was known for beating women, and how they get you to surrender, like what Peter was talking about, there are a lot of different ways to enslave a human being. Some of the ways that Peter was talking about is boyfriending in, where someone will just be extra groovy to a young girl who's vulnerable, who's like, oh, this is love, it's just like the movies, and then next thing you know, she's tricked. A girl can also do the same thing. I'm your new best friend, come with me to this party, give them a date rape drug, take pictures of them, and then say, I'm going to show these pictures to your mom and dad if you don't go on a date with this guy and that guy. I mean, there's all these different ways of enslaving somebody. Me, I was a runaway. And so as soon as I said yes to Peter, then that's it. I mean, you don't hear the jail door shut, but boy, it does. And then you're told the rules. And I don't know how you just all of a sudden you're in, but you just are in. And the rules are the rules. And if you don't do what they say, they make it very clear they're going to kill you. They're going to worse than kill you. They're going to send you to Lowell, Massachusetts, where they do disgusting things with children. And they're very clear about what they're going to do. I was sold to people out of the Holiday Inn by the Bay. That we didn't have internet then. Hunters would come by and they would hire girls. And the pimps don't care about you. All they care about is money. One time there were 5 hunters that came into town, and the other girls were supposed to meet me at the Holiday Inn by the Bay. I'm 15 years old, and no other girl showed up but me. The hunters didn't care that it was just me. The pimp was just like, more money for me. I was in the life for about a year before I was able to escape. So how I escaped was I wanted to die. They didn't use drugs or alcohol on me because it doesn't work on me. I can't tolerate Novocaine or Tylenol, so heroin would just kill me. But they used emotional stuff on me. They threatened to kill me all the time. And so I thought, okay. So I went out back at the house where I was being kept. And I said, I don't know if there's a God. And I'm talking to the woods. And I said, I don't know if you're there. What if I kill myself and there is this thing called hell? If I kill myself, I think you automatically go to hell if you kill yourself. Okay, could that possibly be worse than what I'm living now? What about this reincarnation thing? If I kill myself, am I going to come back as punishment for killing myself in a worse situation than I'm in right now? I can't tell you how many times I had been brutally raped, laying there thinking, okay, breathe. Don't let him hit you in the face. You can do this. Just keep breathing. Don't say anything so they don't kill you. So am I going to come back and have it be worse than what it is? So I said, God, I'm afraid to die. I'm afraid to kill myself. But I can't go on living the way that I'm living. So if you're a real thing, then help me. Please help me. And totally surrendered. I had nothing. I was done. At 16 and a half, whatever, years old. Somehow I was given the strength to walk off the property. Now I know that sounds silly, and why didn't I walk off the property before? But emotionally, I believed that if I stepped foot off that property and Peter saw me, then I'm going to Lowell. I'm going to be beaten worse than I've already been beaten. I'm going to be sent to Lowell where they do the stuff with the dogs and film and whatever. Or he's going to give me to the other guy. Awful. He beats his girls. I was mentally imprisoned. And after that conversation with God, I was able to step foot off the property. And I thought, okay, if Peter comes around the corner, I'll say I saw something in the road. But the further down the road I went, the more I wouldn't have any excuses. He would know. So I walked faster and faster and faster and faster until I got to the first house I saw on the left. I knocked on this person's door. She opened it to say hello, and I darted right inside of her house and said, hi, I need help. I'm being held. I need help. And as the grace of God would be, that woman happened to be going the very next day to a place for alcoholism called Crossroads for Women in Wyndham. Next day. So she called them. Now, I don't know why she didn't call the police, or I'm just telling you what my truth was. She called them and said, hey, I've got this kid here. What do I do? And they said, bring her. So Crossroads is for adult women who have an alcohol problem. I'm a kid with a pimp problem. But they took me, it's a 30-day program, and they let me stay there for 3 months. Amazing that they let me stay there. Amazing that they let me stay there. So I was able to escape, and again, I want to be quick. My parents, when I ran away, I would call my mom and dad and say, I'm okay. Again, I'm leaving out the fact that my parents got divorced. I'm leaving out that my dad had radiation poisoning from the Yankee power plant. He was an electrician. He worked on that plant. He had some radiation. And so I'm telling you that it is my belief, and I'm holding on to that belief, that what I'm going to tell you next is because of the radiation. That's the story. We're sticking with it. When my parents got divorced, being the eldest, my brother and sister went to live with my mom and her new husband, but I stayed to take care of my dad because I'm the oldest and I'm a caretaker, and I stayed to take care of my dad. And my dad became one of my abusers. Go figure. He would throw down a pornographic magazine, and in the magazine it would say it's okay to have sex with your daughter. And he would say, look, in the magazine it says okay. Thus, they're running away for longer and longer periods of time. So while I'm at Crossroads, my 3 months are up, and they need to do something with me. I can't live there indefinitely. I'm 17 years old now. And so they brought me to Day One, which is a residential facility for kids. And the kids interview you, and they tell you if you can stay or not. And the kids interviewed me, and they said, we're worried that you're going to have sex with all the people here. Otherwise, you could stay. And I said, well, how about this? You don't try to have sex with me, and we will get along just great. So I was supposed to go there the next day. And it's a 12-month program, and the 3 months are no communication. You can't walk to the mailbox. You're not allowed to get calls, receive calls, send mail, anything for 3 months. I guess they want to clean slate you, reboot you for that 3 months. So here, and I didn't tell my parents anything. So I'm there at Crossroads. I'm supposed to go to Day One the next day, and my dad calls. And he says, I love you, I need you, come home. That's my dad. My dad was very loving. All right. But he said that, and all these alarms went off inside of me, get home, get home, get home. So the night nurse called the Crossroads people and said, what do I do? And they said, don't help her, don't stop her. So I went, so they didn't stop me, and I got on a bus and a plane and a train and whatever, and I made it home to my dad. This is important. Made it home to my dad. And my dad had, the next morning for breakfast, he had this lump under his arm, like an egg underneath his skin. And I said, what is this? And he said, it's cancer. I said, have you talked to anybody? He said, no. My dad died 3 months later. The 3 months that I would have spent at Day One with no contact, I got to have a spiritual experience with my dad the night that he died. That spiritual experience, which if you're really good, I might tell you someday, it's beautiful, was the spiritual mooring that prepared me for the worst ever. When people say, why do women go back to abusive situations? Why do girls go back on the street? Why do they go back? I'm going to tell you, because the surviving is harder than surviving it in the first place. Anybody who's ever gone to war, who's come back, when the war is over, the war has just begun. The post-traumatic stress that you go through when you come back, when you're finally in a safe place where you're being fed and you've got shelter, your body then releases all of that torture, all of that stress, all of that trauma that you've been endured, the head injuries and the choking and the beatings. You couldn't feel it at the time because you had to survive at the time. And then when you're safe, it all comes. And that was hell. Hell. Waking up in the middle of the night screaming, somebody coming up behind you, your own husband or your own children, falling to the floor, curling up in a ball, hyperventilating, don't hit me, you know? Awful. The panic attacks that you feel like you're going to die for hours at a time. It has been 10 years since I've had a post-traumatic stress episode or night terror or panic attack. Praise God. It's unbelievable. 10 years. But to get to that 10 years took an incredible amount of therapy, every kind of therapy you can imagine. When people ask me what is the most important thing anybody can do, I tell them to do your work. Do enough work. You know, the truth is that 3/4 of the people in this room have been sexually abused. Nobody likes to hear that, but it's true. In order for us to take care of our children so that we can keep them safe from the predators, so that we can end the opioid epidemic and the pandemic of sex trafficking, we have to heal ourselves. We have to have these difficult conversations. We have to heal. And healing takes time. But I am here to tell you that healing can and will take place if you do your work. How am I doing? Okay. So I went on to, briefly, to get my GED because, you know, I didn't finish middle school. So I got a GED, I got some college, I went on and made a 6-figure income in sales. I was the top producing salesperson across the country. Can you believe that? And I bought a house in Maine, and after I was divorced, single, my kids were grown, I bought a house on a little lake in Maine. And right before I turned 50 years old, I wanted to do volunteer work. I wanted to give back. No one knew what happened to me other than very need to know. I didn't tell anybody. This was the story, the little bit of the story that I told you is what was the blackmailer in my head. Oh, she likes you, but if she knew what happened to you, she wouldn't. Oh, these are really nice people, but if they knew your story, they wouldn't want to be your friends anymore. Constant blackmail. So right before I turned 50, 5 years ago, I started volunteering at Long Creek Youth Center in South Portland. And I went there weekly and worked on the girls unit. And the stuff that had happened to me that I didn't tell anybody about was happening to almost every single one of the girls in my unit. And I'm like, oh my God, the people in Maine, I mean, is this seriously happening? And then I met Peter and I started joining all these different advocacy groups and learning about the extent of what was going on. And I thought, how do we change a culture? How can we save our children from being sexually abused? And you know, that's my motto, stop having sex with kids. Seems like a no-brainer, like I even have to say that. But really, stop having sex with kids, right? So through that volunteer work, I said, okay, how can I reach 1.5 million people in the state of Maine, besides just going around and talking and sharing my story? First thing I did was I asked my husband if it was, I said, I'll keep my maiden name. Is it okay if I do this? I asked my friends who didn't even know the story. Everybody was very supportive. I believe that using educational videos using PSAs to educate our community is a great way to reach the vast majority of people in the state of Maine. So I've spoken to thousands of people across the state face to face, but really my passion is to create these videos. Like if you can imagine a game warden standing in front of the camera saying, see these predator tracks? It's easier to see the predators in the Maine woods than it is in our own community. Here's how to tell a predator. Or the lobster woman that I have who fishes in Casco Bay, standing in front of all of her electronics saying, hey, I use technology to hunt fish, but there are people who are using technology to hunt your children. Here's how to do parental controls. So for the past nearly 5 years, I have spoken all over. I've created panels like this all over the state. I've spoken all over the place. And I've been working diligently on these educational videos. And right now, the final step I've got the game warden buy-in. They've said, yes, we have a script. We have the person who's going to do it from Northwoods Law. Excellent. I have the lobster woman. So because it's a Maine employee, the Maine guides, I have to get permission from the governor's office. So I've passed the mustard with everybody, and now it's sitting in Janet Mills' office waiting to get her approval. So if anybody knows Janet, feel free to apply the screws on that one. But using those videos is sort of what I'm passionate about. So prevention through education is what Stop Trafficking Us is about right now. I hope that this panel we're going to ask the panel if they have anything else to say, and then I'm going to put the questions out to you guys. StopTraffingUs.org is my website. If you want to hear the whole disgusting story, feel free. Resources, that's there for you. And I'm going to ask the panelists if there's anything that they feel like they left out that they'd like to share. And then we're going to put it out to you guys to ask any questions that you might have. Panelists?
One thing that you mentioned earlier, Catherine, around parental controls. Many people don't know what controls are out there. One that I recommend, I don't get any kickback for it, it's just the one that in PC Magazine tends to get the highest recommendation, is called Custodio, and that's spelled Custodio, Custodio.com. And it's not that expensive. I think it's $59. Don't quote me on that. And that goes on up to 5 devices in your home: tablets, cell phones, and computers. And what it does is it basically creates, and you have control over what can be blocked, but it creates a firewall so this type of stuff can't get onto your kids' devices.
Cool. Peter?
One thing I'd just like to add, we actually have an app for your smartphone. It's called Operation Predator. You can download it for free. And there's actually predators with their photographs and what they're wanted for that is out there. Most of it is child exploitation, child pornography, child production. It will tell you where they were last seen. It also gives you the opportunity to file a tip anonymously in case you see these individuals. But it's well worth downloading because we've actually had a couple of folks on that tip line, on that Operation Predator from Maine, from New Hampshire, from Massachusetts. When this Operation Predator app first came out about 5 years ago, the very first day it came out, we got tips on 4 of the individuals that were on that app. And within 2 weeks, 3 out of the 4 were arrested. So it does work. And again, if you don't want to be known, there's a place on there that you can make a tip anonymously as well.
Awesome.
I just want to say thank you to Catherine for sharing their story with us, because when you hear a story, it's one thing. When you see a face behind that story, I think it's even more powerful. So thank you for sharing with all of us.
Okay. So now we're going to go to questions that you all, yes.
Wait, why did we use trafficking versus slavery?
Words.
Enslavement.
Oh, enslavement. Why don't we use this? I'm sorry.
Why don't we call it enslaved? Call it what it is. Call it what it is.
There's a difference between what slavery in the old slavery looked like versus the new slavery. We call it modern day slavery. That's what we call it. The reason we call it trafficking is because of the boundaries that it surpasses, the traveling from state to state, from country to country. The way, yeah, they're called slaves. And one of the reasons that we don't call it slavery and we call it human trafficking is because we want to differentiate also between human smuggling as well. So human smuggling is a crime against the border. Human trafficking is a crime against the individual. And we don't use the term slavery because we don't see it as slavery. Slavery, when you look at what it was back in the 1800s, you had them on farms, they took care of their individuals, they treated them, they had legal ownership back then, versus today where there is no legal ownership of slaves. It is a commodity. It is somebody who is used over and over again and then disposed of. Slavery back in the 1800s, they took care of those individuals. They got them medical treatment if they needed. They had legal ownership of these individuals as well. In today's modern slavery, they don't have that. New slavery, as it's called, they don't have legal ownership. They don't take care of these individuals. They don't get them medical treatment. So there's a big difference between the way it is today and the way it was back in the 1800s as well.
Okay, so now I have a third point. So now you've brought in white supremacy into the discussion. So I will have a conversation of white people in a room. Slave owners did not take care of their slaves. They were enslaved people. These are enslaved people, and we need to use language that addresses the human being at the center of this, and we do not, and that is one of the reasons we are not winning. The second thing, the third thing I want to bring up. We are sitting here, there are 6 tables full of women. Where are the men? Men, how are you going to come and get your boys? What are men doing? What are men doing for this? This is not a problem that women can solve. This is a problem that white men must show up to.
I'm right here.
Yes.
I'm right here too. I'm right here too. And it's a problem that not only white men, but also white women also need to work to solve.
Together.
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 Together. It's not a them and us.
We're all on the same side.
Yeah.
We're all on the same side. And you're trying to
And I
put
think
division up between us.
I think I said
Right.
that in the very beginning, that this isn't just a women's issue. It's an issue that affects both men and women, because there are males out there who are also victims
That's
as
right.
well. So we do have males who are victims, but unfortunately,
And there are women perpetuating crime. against
Right. That's right.
we've had,
So let's not get into like the not all white men discussion, okay? That's
is
a
a huge-
really
this is a huge
super
issue.
easy thing to do. Okay, but we're sitting in a Catholic church, all right, in the hall of a Catholic church. Let's all let that sink in for a little bit. We're sitting in the hall of a Catholic church. We're
Yes.
sitting in an institution where a couple weeks ago, 7 of the priests at Chevron were outed, okay? This is a problem we have in our institution that we need to show up to. And that
We're
there
here.
is not enough men showing up to have the discussion. Why is this not a hall full of men talking to
We
each
can't
other?
control what people who aren't here.
Right.
We're here to make a
Can I just want to address something on that though.
Here, or the people who are here, and that's what it feels like you're doing.
Jump in.
Right? We're here because we're taking a proactive stance on this problem. Okay? You don't have to call us out. We're here.
Right.
And I just want to make some point here. Back last June at the East Point Church, they had me and I spoke to 300 men about this problem. And there are a lot of people who want to pay attention to this. And I understand your frustration. It's a frustration that's probably shared among this room, that not enough people know about this.
That's why we're here.
But the more people that understand this, and if you want to proactively change the language of the statute to bring in that, call your legislator, let them know. I'll tell you this much: 5 years ago, it was called promotion of prostitution. Now it's called sex trafficking. So we're making steps. We're not there yet. We're not all the way, but we're making steps. But it takes everybody in this room to keep it going. So next time, if you want to have us back, we'll be back. And if you want to bring a lot more men here, that's fine. If you want to bring a lot more women here, that's fine. If you want to bring anybody here,
Right.
we will talk, and hopefully people will listen.
I want to say thank you very much for coming, you guys, and all you other guys. I want to say thank you for showing up. There needs to be more young people, because this is a young person's problem. I got a lot of grandchildren living down in Boston. I've actually been to Lowell, Lawrence, all those things. And so we're all here, and we all have to be given credit for all showing up and everything. And I actually think there's a lot of guys there. And, but we're all older. We're all older, and it's a young person, like, you know, like teenage, and in your twenties, and maybe in your thirties and stuff, and those are the men that we have to get to.
You have grandchildren, right? I have 5 grandchildren. So don't underestimate the power of us. You know, what I said before about being an opportunity blocker, you know, you've got the kahunas, and I don't know about you, but when I hit menopause, my give a damn broke, you know, okay? So you've got what it takes to say something when you see something. You've got what it takes to say, no, 13-year-old, you're not going to go walking through the mall by yourself or do a coffee shop or. No, I would beg to differ that the grandparents, the older people here, I mean, you've got more time, more eyes. The,
When I'm in my family's all over the country, so I don't have anything. But I see a lot of stuff right here on the streets of Portland.
there you go.
So I see a lot of things, and I worked from 30 years, I worked with kids and everything, so I saw a lot of stuff. I had Rihanna say to me, 5 years old, my mother says I'm going to the state. What's the state? And the other kid says, believe me, Rihanna, you don't want to know. The 3rd grade kid saying to me,
Right, right. The school, the middle school where my 2 of my grandchildren go, the principal asked me to come and speak, which we actually, Jennifer and Jonathan and I did. They had an issue that parents were selling their middle school child for drug money. And so they asked if we would come and speak to the teachers. We had about 70 staff. So, you know, wherever there are people, all the people that are here, what if we only saved 1 person per person that's in this room? Right? Man. So you drive safely.
all you guys that showed up.
Drive safely. God bless you. Thanks for coming. I see a hand.
First of all, thank you. Sorry.
You're in a safe place. Take a breath and.
No, I won't. First of all, thank you for your story. Thank you for bringing it forward. Your the thing is that that's your story. is one. I'm afraid of doing it. And I think in this day and age, it's something that really does resonate and needs to continue to resonate. We together need to do something about this. Guys, Catherine, you're a woman, I don't know her name.
Jennifer.
Jennifer. Being here and bringing this to life for us is very important. We see it so much in the media, but we don't know so much of personal stories because it gets, the media brings it up, and then it dilutes, and the media brings it up, and it dilutes. We never hear about what happens after that woman is killed. We don't hear of it because it goes away. These kinds of stories, and it's not really a story.
I understand. Yep, I understand.
Becomes embedded in a person like myself and the other men and women that are here. And what I want to know is, as a group, what can we do together? In that letter to Janet Mills, if we had a form letter, what could we do in writing that letter that would provide you the support that we need to, so that your work, all of your work, can continue to move forward?
I'm humbled by that. Thank you.
And thank you for being who you are, with all the women around you, and the men that are around you that support this work. It's important work that needs to be continued, and this stuff, I like to say, the shit has got to stop. And I don't know where we even begin. You're one of a million in terms of the light that you're shedding. And we all appreciate that light. And we need to spark that light within others. And however we can do that,
There's so many cool ways to do it, like the,
thank you.
being able to, just to remind other human beings when their kids are getting ready to go to camp, to have that conversation, water talk, around the water cooler when guys are sexualizing women, to say, hey, that's uncool. I mean, there's so many ways of being a light of love around this change. There's so many things that you guys can do. And I think you were just given a card, so that's cool. Yep. Go ahead.
There are so many groups out there now that Catherine did a great job with putting them together. Support them financially. Support them with volunteer time. You can do so much out there with just so little effort, because it's all about understanding that this issue's out there. I don't know if anybody was paying attention, but there was an article about how there were 7 people charged with sex trafficking down at the Super Bowl. Unfortunately, we know in law enforcement that areas such as the Super Bowl, the Democrat and the Republican national conventions, where there's a vast group of people getting together, that's when we see more activity happen on websites that promote prostitution. And we know that those websites mainly are being operated, not the websites, the ads themselves on the websites are being operated by traffickers. People have to understand that. We need to change the perception in our culture about what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. So do it within your own family and friends. And if you can support these survivor groups, these NGOs, groups out there that want to do the right thing, go for it. And now that you're aware of the problem, that's one of the first steps that we have to take.
I'll give it to you. Just what I would tell you is that this is at a pandemic level. You guys are just sort of learning about it. Never mind trying to comprehend epidemic. Never mind pandemic. So when something is so big, I get overwhelmed and then I freeze. Like I don't know what to do, so I don't do anything. So I had to find my narrow lane what crushes me, what drops me to my knees. And for me, it's children. Children drop me to my knees. The thought of anybody doing anything awful to a child just drops me to my knees. So that's my narrow lane, is prevention of child sexual abuse as the precursor to sex trafficking, but that's my thing. Dee Clark, it's Survivors Speak USA. Her heart is for the woman still on the street or newly off the street. So Dee Clark's advocacy is working with women while they're on the street, and then she has a program for them after they've been off for a year, and she does a lot of legal stuff too, so that's her. Another survivor leader, that's Dee Clark as a survivor leader, another survivor leader, Trisha Grant, she works with Just Love, a part of the East Point Church, and she does a lot of stuff in schools. So she does high-risk kids, has groups for them. That's her thing. So you have to find individually and collectively as a group, if you want to do it that way, like what is your one thing? Because dilution is not the solution. If you try to do all and be all, you're not going to do anything very well, right? So find what touches your heart and focus narrowly on that thing. And that's something that you guys can pray about, come together as a group, and figure out what you want to do. Being able to contact Janet Mills on my thing, I can't tell you it has been so difficult for me to surrender in the waiting, because I've been working on this PSA for so many years. For it to be so close, I'm just waiting for a yes. It is just, if I could explode, I would. So I would appreciate you guys reaching out and saying, hey, I heard about this educational thing. We support that. I hope that you'll support Stop Trafficking Us and making that happen. That would be fantastic. But really collectively come together and find out where your heart is at and follow that.
One of the things I want to add too, we still have a long way to go in the fight on human trafficking. In the year 2000, the Trafficking Victims Protection Act came out, and that made human trafficking a federal crime. So you're talking in 2000. In 2012, 12 years later, we only had one safe house in the entire New England area, and that was in Massachusetts. And that was run by the Sisters of Bakita House down in Boston. They only had 3 beds. So in 2012, we had one safe house with 3 beds. Today, 2019, we now have 7 safe houses in New England. And
How many beds?
2 more are in development that are going to open probably within the next year or 2. The 7 safe homes we have now equates to about 36 beds.
Nice.
And that's not a lot. Every single safe house that we have right now is full with women.
And nothing for minors, nothing for men.
And there's no safe homes for males. So, and there's a wait list for all these safe homes as well. So we still have a long way to go when it comes to fighting this. We still need more safe homes. The reason what happens is the safe homes don't last that long because they run out of funding. Most of the safe homes that are out there in existence now are all faith-based as well. So one of the ideas I had, somebody said, well, what can we do? One of the ideas I have is let's contact the major hotel chains. Let's contact Marriott hotels. Let's contact Holiday Inns, Hampton Inns, because these are the places we're taking the women out of. This is where they're turning their tricks, in these hotels. So the hotels are making the money as well off of these women's backs. So let's say to these hotels, hey, would you be willing to donate $100,000 to support a safe house for the year? One, it will keep the safe house running, and in return, we'll train your staff on what human trafficking is and what it looks like. So it's a win-win situation for everybody. So that's something that we need to do as well. But again, we still have a long way to go in this fight.
And just to let some people know, in Cumberland County, the South Portland Police Department does educational programs for hotel employees, and they've actually gotten a great response. and it's for people behind the desk when individuals come into the hotel to recognize victims of sex trafficking, to recognize what's going on at the hotels. I think Peter makes a great suggestion because internationally, these are big corporations. Locally, though, on the same level, I mean, the employees at these hotels are our neighbors. They are the people in our community. So that is being done, but there's still a lot more we can do. And just on what Peter was talking about with safe houses, we have one safe house that just opened up in the Lewiston area called Safe Voices. If anybody wants to support that, I'm sure they could always use resources. And then we also have a house called Hope Rising, or I think it's going to be retitled.
Courage Lives.
Courage Lives, and that is one of the sort of the original programs that we have in the state of Maine and almost New England that will bring in victims of sex trafficking, and it's a program that lasts about 6 months. The only issue is with it is that it only has 5 beds, and we wish we could duplicate it all throughout the state and all throughout the country because it's such a great program, and there's a lot of victims who have gone there who are now survivors who are helping out other people to get out of the life.
I just want to say in closing, as a therapist, closing for myself, but as a therapist, this is a lot to take in tonight. Like Catherine said, it's very much a huge problem that you're sort of just learning about. And so be gentle with yourselves tonight. I went out to the car to settle that young girl who was here tonight who was very upset. I said, so those things can happen for us tonight after we leave, so be gentle with yourselves. And lastly, I think the thing I would want you to take away tonight for what I added to this is that if we educate our kids from a young age, like I said, around safety and awareness and sexuality, we won't have to fight this. We have to start young. We have to be responsible and accountable. And out of the 600 adults that come to my workshops, only about 12% are males. But that is because in the literature, sex education is predominantly done by women and mothers. That's what the literature bears out. And so what I always say for daughters, and Catherine and I have talked about this a lot, it's so critically important to father our daughters. And so they can see what relationship is like and how to remedy conflicts and all of those things that we do statistically, because they may statistically be in a relationship with someone of the opposite gender. And so just everyone as a community showing up like you did tonight, it can make a difference.
Thank you for coming. Thank you. Thank you.